Violence continues in Ecuador, despite the state of siege decreed by the government in 3 provinces. The Russian government announced that at least 126 people were evacuated from the Azovstal steel plant in the Ukrainian city of Mariupol. And Iran's President Syed Ebrahim Raisi called on the Islamic world to do its best to stop the Israelis' attacks on Palestine. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm your anchor Gladys Quesada from the TeleSUR studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. And now we begin. Violence continues in Ecuador despite the state of siege and militarization decreed by Guillermo Lazo's government in 3 provinces. The authorities reported attacks with explosives, killings and confrontations between criminals and officers in uniform during the first weekend after the implementation of the measures. The last case was registered this Sunday when a group of policemen, officers, confronted an armed gang in which one of the criminals was killed. Early on Saturday, a prison security agent was reportedly killed in the Bastian Popular area in the Pascuales district. President Lazo has blamed drug trafficking for the crime problems in the nation, which he said is used as a transit route for cocaine smuggled from some neighborhood countries. In Colombia, the presidential candidate Gustavo Petro denounced a plan to attack him. The announcement made through the press release, Petro warned that his security team alerted him to possible actions against his life by a criminal group called the Mountain Range, dedicated to drug trafficking and contract killings. The information provided by the security team was then confirmed by the analysis and investigation team that directs Petro's presidential campaign, which had access to sources from police institutions. Faced with this situation, Petro announced that his visit to the coffee axis of the country, scheduled for May 3rd and 4th, was suspended. Bolivia's President Luis Arce said that his country earned more than $50 billion during the last 16 years after the nationalization of the hydrocarbon industry. The president pointed out that the nationalization of the oil and gas industry continues to benefit Bolivians, allowing to finance public investment projects and the social bonds. The Ministry of Hydrocarbons and Mining indicated that after 16 years, the results of the nationalization are visible in the country. He also said that neoliberal privatization by previous governments diverted most of the gas sales income to private companies and to Argentina and Brazil, while Bolivia only kept 18%, even though it was the owner of the gas. Social organizations in El Salvador described as negative the first year in office of the National Congress. The Legislative Assembly, with a large pro-government majority, celebrated its first year in office this Sunday amidst criticism and accusations from the opposition and the international community for some of its decisions. The dismissal of constitutional magistrates and the approval of Bitcoin as a legal tender were some of the decisions strongly criticized. In this context, the international community and opposition parties expressed their concern about the state of the rule of law in the Central American country and the concentration of power by President Nayib Bukele. Welcome back to From the South. And reporting on International Workers' Day from Brazil is our correspondent Brian Mier with a story on how the workers of Sao Paulo mobilized to fight for their rights and celebrate the date.
On May 1st, thousands of Brazilian union workers gathered in front of Pacaembu Stadium in São Paulo for the annual International Workers' Day rally.
May 1st is very symbolic. It is a day for the workers to take back the streets. It's important for the working class to unite against this riot of death, which is on the way, not just in Brazil, but in the whole world.
Due to his arbitrary political imprisonment and the COVID-19 pandemic, this was the first time former Brazilian president and union leader Lula was able to make a public speech on International Workers' Day in years, and the workers were excited to see him.
Lula is here, first, because he represents us. He's the greatest working class leader this country has ever had. Second, for the fact that he brings hope to the working class, especially those who most need it.
Former President Lula told the audience that he's planning to officially announce whether he will run for president or not this year on May 7th, and that if the Workers' Party decides to nominate him as its candidate, he's ready to accept the challenge.
This Lula that you see here is 76. This Lula you see here has more experience than the 50 years old Lula who won the first election. This Lula has the energy of the 30-year-old, and the motivation and desire to fight for this country is, effectively, the greatest I have ever had.
Brian Mier, TeleSUR, São Paulo.
Now we move on to other topics. The Russian government announced that at least 126 people were evacuated from the Azovstal steel plant in the Ukrainian city of Mariupol. According to the statement of the Russian Ministry of Defense, since Saturday, April 30th, about 21 people left the steel plant, while 25 others left near houses and were received by Russian authorities. After their departure, the civilians received medical care, drinking water and food. The citizens, mostly of Ukrainian origin, expressed their decision to be evacuated to their territories controlled by the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic. As a result of the Russian operation, also on Sunday, another 80 civilians were evacuated, 69 of whom expressed their wish to return to Ukraine and were handed over to the Red Cross and representatives of the United Nations. According to the Russian security forces, all people evacuated from Azovstal pass a verification of documents and personal data, as the filtration is a mandatory procedure for all those leaving the steel plant, with the aim of searching for Ukrainian nationalists among the civilians, to bring them to the Prisoners Exchange Fund and to prosecute them before the authorities of the Donetsk People's Republic for the war crimes committed on civilian population. And the head of the Russian diplomacy, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, stated that his country does not seek a regime change in Ukraine. He reaffirmed that Moscow's goal is to ensure the safety of the population in the East. During an interview with an Italian media, the Russian foreign minister confirmed that they do not want President Volodymyr Zelensky to surrender, but to order a ceasefire, disband the nationalist battalions, and stop the violence against civilians. Lavrov insisted that the key to end the armed conflict lies with Kiev and not with Moscow. The diplomat recalled the crisis of the Ukrainian people and state began when the President Zelensky assured that he will not comply with the Minsk agreements. And the head of the Hungarian Prime Minister office, Gergely Gulyas, said that apart from his country, 9 other European nations have opened accounts in Russian banks in accordance with Moscow's guideline to accept gas payments in rubles. The Hungarian Foreign Minister said on Friday that several European gas suppliers to Russia have agreed to new payment terms in rubles, but were keeping it quiet and disseminating misleading information about these nations' attitude on the subject. Russian Gazprom said that 4 European gas buyers have already paid for gas deliveries from Russia, complying with the Kremlin's resolution to only accept rubles in exchange for Russian gas. Under the new guideline proposed by Moscow, Gazprom Bank opened special foreign currency and ruble accounts for foreign customers. Buyers will be able to then transfer funds in the currencies specified in the gas contracts. Police in Armenia's capital on Monday detained 180 anti-government demonstrators that were blocking streets to protest against Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. Protests demanding that Pashinyan step down reignited in Armenia last month after he spoke in the country's parliament about the need to sign a peace agreement with Azerbaijan. Armenia and Azerbaijan have been locked in a decades-old conflict over the separatist region of Nagorno-Karabakh, which is part of Azerbaijan but has been under Armenian control since the early 1990s. In a 6-week war in the fall of 2020, Azerbaijan was able to reclaim control over large swaths of land in and around the region before signing a Russia-brokered truce with Armenia. As both nations edge closer to reaching a proper peace agreement this year, opposition forces in Armenia have resumed protests and also against Pashinyan. Rallies in the capital, Yerevan, are being held almost daily since April 17th. In France, Jean-Luc Mélenchon's party La France Insoumise signed a historic agreement with Europe Ecology Les Verts ahead of the June legislative elections. The agreement came after weeks of negotiations progressing between the socialist and communist parties. The deal was the culminating moment of this year's May Day, which also saw the parties of the left interact in the Parisian parade in a good-natured atmosphere, rarely seen between parties, but are now aiming to claim a majority at the National Assembly in June. According to sources close to the negotiations, the agreement notably allocates 100 constituencies to the Greens and their allied environmentalist parties. The negotiations between La France Insoumise and Europe Ecology Les Verts were the most advanced of the bilateral discussions initiated by the Insoumise with each of the main parties of the left, after Mélenchon scored 22% in the first round of the presidential elections. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. We are back. Iran's President Syed Ebrahim Raisi called on the Islamic world to do its best to stop the Israelis' attacks on Palestine. The Iranian premier said on Monday during a telephone call with Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan that it was necessary to employ all international efforts and capabilities to stop the Zionist regime's inhuman attacks. The Persian leader emphasized that the policy of the Islamic Republic and Turkey should be focused on supporting the Palestinian people and on rescuing them from Tel Aviv's colonialist repression. The Israeli occupation forces have increased their attacks against the Palestinians since the beginning of Ramadan, leaving a large number of people dead, wounded, and detained in the occupied Palestinian territory. And around 200,000 Palestinians prayed during Eid al-Fitr, a holiday to celebrate the end of the Muslim Ramadan. The Palestinians went on Monday to the old city of occupied Jerusalem, where they heard the sermon of the Imam of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, who called for resistance and the need for a continuous presence in the so-called blessed mosque to counter the schemes that the Israeli occupation seeks to impose. The religious authority reminded the faithful that the mosque has witnessed repressive operations by the occupation forces in recent days and that they cannot allow such desecration or harm to its sanctity. In this context, Muslims in Nairobi, the capital of Kenya, gathered on Monday at the Rama Mosque to celebrate the end of Ramadan. The mosque's imam said that it's also a day to remember the poor and less fortunate. This year, Muslims around the world observed the activity marked with communal prayers, gatherings around festive meals, and new clothes. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres began a tour to several West African countries. During his visit to Senegal, the first stop, Guterres visited the construction site of the future UN headquarters for West Africa in the new town of Diamniadio and the vaccine manufacturing plant being built by the Institute Pasteur. He took part in a traditional Ramadan sunset meal with President Macky Sall and current chairperson of the African Union, UN Deputy Spokesperson Farhan Haq, said at a press briefing. The next visits will be to Niger and Nigeria. His tour will end on May the 4th. In the same scenario, Antonio Guterres called on the military boards in Burkina Faso, Guinea and Mali to hand power back to civilians as soon as possible.
Regarding West Africa and Sahel, we spoke about joint efforts against terrorism and violent extremism and about the situation in Burkina Faso, Guinea and Mali. On that point, we agreed on the importance to pursue dialogue with the de facto authorities of these three countries to ensure the return to constitutional order as soon as possible.
In Raqqa, northern Syria, several members of the Syrian Democratic Forces were killed and some of them injured amid an attack of their checkpoints. Activists in the area reported the attackers, not yet identified, were armed and carried out the assault with explosive devices and shrapnel that they used against pro-United States militia posts, and two of their war vehicles deployed in the west and southwest of the city of Raqqa and around the village of Al-Amra, north of the city. In the Philippines, 8 persons died, including 6 children, when a fire ripped through a poor community in Quezon City on Monday and destroyed 80 houses. 3 other persons were injured in the blaze, which started on the second floor of a house in a crowded informal settlement inside the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Senior fire officer Greg Bichara said it took nearly 2 hours to extinguish the blaze. He also stated that the victims were trapped inside their homes as the fire spread quickly. Their ages are not yet known, but authorities confirmed 6 were minors. An investigation into the cause was underway. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.